Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stratch Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 9-12 AD carry tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton with visibility on the channel. It's free, it's easy, it just takes a couple of clicks. You can always find access to this Google Doc on the left in the description if you'd like. If you click on the little mini links for each champion, you'll find a rating system 1 to 5, recommended runes, recommended items, and a link to the wiki where you can learn more about the abilities. The 1 to 5 system is just 1 means the champion is one of the best at the role, whatever that task is. The 5 means the champion is one of the worst, or 5 is one of the best at the task, and 1 is one of the worst at the task. So we have lane pressure, kill threat, safety is how safe is the champion from ganks during the laning phase, scaling, how well does the champion perform over time, and then reliability is how likely is it someone can perform at a high level on this champion over numerous games. So part of that is how difficult is the champion to play, both mechanically and in terms of decisions. Then also how well does the champion fit into the meta, as well as, you know, performing well against other, you know, top champions, and how popular are certain counter picks to that champion, and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. Tier 1 is going to be Sivir, Draven, Jinx, Caitlyn, Twitch. Tier 2 is Xayah, Ezreal, Xayah, Kog'Maw, Lucian. Then Tier 3 is Misfortune, Trist, Jhin, Vayne, and Cassiopeia. So let's start off with Sivir here. Sivir's just pick ban, basically, most of the time, I think. She's just really overpowered right now, and there are several reasons for this, and I've talked about this for several patches now, why she's so strong. People are figuring it out. She does have a really high win rate. She's starting to get a pretty high play rate overall, so she is now the 3rd most played champion, but she has almost a 55% win rate, 54.7, and is the 3rd most played overall, and is not really banned that much relative to how strong she is. People still ban out things like Draven and Vayne, and I guess Yasuo, but he doesn't really play AD carry that much. So she's up there, you know, she's one of the top, I guess, 5 most banned champions, but she really needs to be the #1 banned AD carry for several reasons. So let's look at her kit just really quick, and then we'll move on. So part of it is that even in bad matchups or bad game states, she can really neutralize the situation and wait to scale up, which means that even when she's not doing that well, she's still going to be relevant in a lot of games. This is a huge deal because you're probably going to fall behind, or your team is, you know, at least 30% of the time. Even if you're completely dominating lane and you're doing very well, it's likely that your team, at some point, you're going to have both mid and top feed, or your jungler's going to feed, or your support's just going to keep inting into them. You know, bad stuff's going to happen. So thinking about how to mitigate and limit your downside is really important as an AD carry. And one of the main ways you can do that is through wave clear. And she has very, very good wave clear. Wave clear is also extremely strong if you're ahead. So it's good if you're ahead, and it's good if you're behind. And she has the best wave clear in the game. Certainly as AD carry, but I think arguably as almost any champion in the game, because she not only has really good wave clear, but she has good mobility as well. So from the wave clear side of it, obviously her boomerang is going to do a ton of damage to the minions, and her ricochet is relatively cheap at 60 mana, does a ton of damage to minions as well, and scales with crit. This is a huge thing with her, is that critical strike is extremely good because these bounces, all of them can crit. So it does a ton of damage. So what this means is, you know, if you're behind and that mid laner just keeps roaming bot and they want to dive you, you're going to make it really hard for them to dive because you can just clear the wave almost instantly to where it never touches your tower. So makes her very difficult to dive, and then you're also able to get priority in lane by pushing up the wave really quickly to go help your jungler do scuttle, to go grab some dragons, to maybe go roam mid lane if your mid's having a hard time and they're getting pushed in. You want to roam mid with your support and your jungler. You have the ability to get that priority and make that happen, to put pressure on towers. And even if you're in kind of a bad matchup bottom, so like even if your support is just like, I don't know, they pick Janna or something and they just AFK behind you and just put a shield on you every now and then and don't do anything, you know, it's okay. You can just keep pushing the enemy into tower. And even if they have something really aggressive, like they have a Draven, Leona, or whatever, if you can just wave clear fast enough, it's going to be really hard for them to engage on you because you're always going to have minion priority, and they're going to take a ton of damage if they do that. So that just means that, like, even if you're, you know, other people on your team aren't performing well, you could mitigate that downside with that push, put it in their tower, make it difficult to dive, you know, make up for the fact that your support is basically a bot behind you, or make up for the fact that your jungler never comes bottom and you keep getting camped over and over again. She's really good at handling those situations, a lot better than most other AD carries. So part of that's wave clear. Part of it's also her movement that I mentioned before. Her passive, people forget about this. Anytime you hit a champion with anything, not just an auto attack, but autos or ricochets or your boomerang, anything is going to give her this for 2 seconds. Not decaying movement speed, full movement speed, 30 to 50 for 2 seconds. So that means if you're trying to run people down, to do that extra damage or maybe even get that kill, you can do that, but you can also kite really well. You know, you can just auto attack and run away or throw that boomerang and run away. It'll hit them once on the way out and then again on the way back in. So it'll give you 2 procs of this movement. So that helps her get away. And then, of course, she's got her ultimate, which gives her and her team and a ton of bonus movement speed. Now, this does decay over to 20% after a few seconds, but it's still going to be very, very strong. So once again, it's dual purpose. You can initiate if you're really far ahead, your team wants to run the enemy team down, or if you're just in a bad situation, you're trying to push a side lane, or you know, your team is about to get flanked and engaged on, you can use that to get away as well. So that just makes her really strong, that she's got 2 different kinds of movement speed. She's got really good wave clear. She has really good scaling with the ability to crit off a ricochet, and she has spell shield. So that makes it very difficult, especially for kind of these hook or hard engaged champions to get on her if she has good reflexes. So Nautilus ult is very easy to block with spell shield. She's one of the only AD carries that can deal with that. He's really popular right now, and he's still a very strong support. You can block things like Thresh, Pike, Sejuani ult, Ashe Arrow, Varus ult. I mean, any number of things. Spell Shield's going to be able to block it. So that makes her very, very slippery, very difficult to get on, very difficult to punish, just because of the wave clear, the movement, and the Spell Shield. So really good scaling, really good split pushing, really good farming. She can just do anything that you want to do. I mean, even if you're getting suppressed and hard camped bottom, you know, you can still have this on the hunt. If that Darius is doing really well top lane, you know, in the mid game, you can boost that Darius in to help him catch up to people and make that play. So really good with meatballs, you know, like Darius or like Sejuani, just these kind of beefy tanks. Just allows him to stick to people in team fights. So pretty awesome utility. Then another aspect of her team fighting that makes her so good is that this ricochet, you can attack the front lines. You can attack that tank, that Sejuani or whatever in your face with ricochet, and it's still going to bounce through and hit the back line as well. So she does a ton of area of effect damage in team fights with her boomerang blade and her ricochet. This puts up tremendous damage even while staying in position, you know, not trying to run past the tank. So does great AoE damage in team fights. So yeah, she's just a total package. Excellent scaling, very difficult to punish, really good at a bunch of different team comps, great combination of both utility and power. So you just want to go Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Footwear, Biscuits, and then just Berserker, Essence Reaver, Static Shiv, and Infinity Edge. You will see some people go Infinity Edge first sometimes. If you're really far ahead, I guess that can work, but I think Essence Reaver is really where it's at. It does a little bit less damage than Infinity Edge, but the big thing is you get that mana back, which really allows you to kind of take your farming into overdrive. So you can really hyper push one of those side lanes. You can start farming the jungle. Your CDR is going to be up much more often, so you're going to be safer. You're going to have more spell shields. You're going to have more ultimates. So you're really going to be able to exert a lot more pressure on the map with that. So yes, you're going to have a little bit less sort of individual raw DPS power with Essence Reaver than Infinity Edge, but you're going to have a lot more ability to farm and to influence different aspects of the game. So I think that ultimately that's better. I like Static Shiv second. That doubles down on your team fight capabilities. That can crit and do a lot of AoE in fights. It also wave clears really well. You are a lot less safe with that. Most people will get Phantom Dancer, so if they have Assassins, you can get a Phantom Dancer instead. You can also get Ninja Tabby if you really need it instead. It's kind of weird because you should be able to block a lot of stuff. But sometimes they just have that really fed Talon or whatever, and you need to get some Ninja Tabby. It's okay. You can still farm enough with Sivir to where eventually you can catch up in items, even if you get Tabby and you're a little bit behind on attack speed. It doesn't feel great, but it is on the table. Yeah, I still like the just Essence Reaver and then either Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv and Infinity Edge. I don't recommend Rapid Fire Cannon because I don't think she's all about that first shot. It is nice, but I think Rapid is really just for people that are going to go Fleet Footwork, so you get the Fleet procs more often, gives you a bit more mobility, a bit more healing, and you pretty much always want Lethal Tempo with her rather than Fleet, so I don't really like Rapid Fire, but I do think that Phantom or Static can be pretty good there. Okay, let's move on to the second one here, and I think that's going to be Draven. Now, Draven is a little bit lower as far as the win rate goes, but he has so much raw power that I think you're just remiss if you don't have Draven pretty high on most tier lists. It's because he does so much damage. If we go in here, click on Draven, get in there. The big thing is that he pretty much comes to lane with a BF sword. So he's going to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 bonus attack damage off of his spinning axe. So he's going to get 35, and then it's 65% of your bonus AD. You're not going to have a ton of bonus AD right at the start, but you will have Doran's Blade. You will have a few runes. So it's likely that he's going to have 35 to 40 bonus attack damage on hit. So that means he just hits like a truck in lane. It's really hard to trade small skirmishes with him. If your support has any kind of CC, if they hard engage, if it's like a Thresh or a Nautilus or a Leona or whatever, Nami Bubble, then he just does tremendous damage early on, and he has great scaling. People forget about this. They think, oh, Draven's great early game, but he's terrible late. It's like, no, he's good late game too, because this has up to 105% of your bonus AD. That's pretty much like a critical strike. It doesn't include your base AD, so it's not quite as good as a crit. It doesn't get modified by Infinity Edge. This bonus damage itself cannot crit, so keep that in mind. But it's a lot of damage. It's a whole lot of damage. So when you start getting a lot of critical strike, a lot of AD, I mean, you're going to be like two-shotting people in the mid to late game, especially squishy champs. So he does struggle a little bit against tanks in general, just because he doesn't have like a lot of extra attack speed. He has some, but he has to catch the axes to keep that going. So he's okay against tanks. He's okay, but he's not going to do as much like just raw damage as something like a Xayah or something like a Vayne that has these percentage damage type of hits in there. And he doesn't kite quite as well as something like a Sivir, although, you know, he does get a lot of movement speed, and he can keep this up in fights pretty well as long as you're catching axes. So he's all right. He's a lot better in, you know, the mid to late game than people think, but it's really his ability to snowball so hard in the early game, and that's, you know, kind of how he has his reputation. But yeah, ton of damage. If you ever get a kill, you obviously get a lot of extra gold off of his adoration stacks. He does get some really big ticket items first up. Usually he goes Bloodthirster and then Infinity Edge. And so just having that raw AD with how much it scales off a spinning axe just gives you one of the best single item power spikes in the game, and double item power spikes. Because a lot of champions who are going for kind of these like attack speed builds, whether it's Ginsu's or Zeal builds, those really take a couple of items to come online. You know, Kai'Sa's got to get, you know, either Storm Razor or Mirror Mana plus Ginsu's, and then she starts doing some damage. Think about someone like Jinx. She really needs Infinity Edge plus Hurricane before she comes online. A lot of champions are like that, where, especially with the crit itemization, you really need a couple of crit items before you can get going. The one exception to that is kind of Sivir, but that's not because of the raw damage that she deals. It's because of the utility off of Essence Reaver and just how much she can farm with that item. But he is very, very strong off of Bloodthirster, so he can be oppressive in the laning phase, especially if you take Klepto, because you're going to be stealing a lot of life. As you get that Vamp Scepter early, allows you to take much more aggressive trades. You're going to get potions off of Klepto. You're going to get those little mini flasks that give you extra AD. You can get wards off of Klepto, so you can push up and be safer about it. And of course, I don't remember if I mentioned it, but you're going to get the health potions and the mana potions, so you can keep up the harassment as well. So I think Klepto gives you a lot of leverage in the early game. You can harass him, you know, maybe take a couple of tower plates. So, yeah, he's just good. He's got the movement speed. Stand Aside's also really good against a lot of engages. People really underestimate this, but this can stop, like, Sejuani charges, like Jarvan's flag and drag, Zax's engages. There's a lot of stuff that Stand Aside can be pretty good with. And then, of course, Whirling Death does a lot of damage. Now, they did change Whirling Death. I believe on this patch, they bug fixed it. It was either this patch or last patch where they bug fixed it to where it was doing, like, full damage to all targets and wasn't falling off. And then they changed it to where the damage does fall off now. Now I don't know where, if that was this patch or last patch, like I said, but they changed that fairly recently, I'm remembering. So he's okay, but he is really hard to play, so you got to be able to catch those axes. You know, try to be aggressive but not die so you don't lose your stacks. But he definitely has the potential to completely take over the game. In my one-trick video, I'll always recommend him as the best one-trick just because he's very underrated a lot of times. People don't play him because he is so hard to play. He's very rarely banned. I mean, he has a decent ban rate, but it's not like he's like Yasuo level bans, right? Where it's like 50% ban. And he can just really like hard carry a game by himself because he has such great pressure early. So remember, lifesteal does trigger off of his Q. That's why people get Bloodthirster. That's why he's so strong in the early game. So do not start off with Infinity Edge unless you're hyper fed. You always want that Bloodthirster first, just because of the special interaction with his Q, and then you start going the Infinity Edge stuff. So you just want to go Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, and then Rapid Fire Cannon. Now, Rapid Fire is good on him. I know I said I don't like Rapid Fire except on Fleet Footwork users. He's the exception just because his first hit is so powerful, because you have so much raw AD and that extra Q damage. This means you really want to get that first hit in there with Rapid Fire. So I think Klepto, Footwear, Biscuits, then Time Warp Tonic, then Triumph, Coup de Grace. You can also go press the attack if you want to. That's going to make you do a bit more damage on that third hit. But I like Klepto for smaller trades and just accumulating that money just so that you get to that Bloodthirster status faster just because you're so strong with that. But it really depends on your lane and what you're doing. So yeah, Draven, very strong right now. Highly recommend him. You know, some people might have him a bit lower, especially after the nerf to his R with the bug fix. But he's in tier 1 somewhere. I just have him up here because I think he's my favorite AD carry to have on my team. Well, Sivir probably is on, you know, the last couple of patches, but historically and still right now, Draven is a very, very high priority just because he's so aggressive and can take over the game early on. Okay, let's talk about Jinx. So Jinx is the other champion with Sivir that has an extremely high win rate right now. I think she's close to 54%. She is at 54.2%. So Jinx is still going to be really strong. And the key with Jinx is she scales super well and she's very versatile. So she has kind of some similarities to Sivir in many cases. So she has very good wave clear early on. Not quite as good as Sivir, but those rockets do scale really well. She does get a lot of movement speed in fights. If you get a kill or an assist, you get a ton of extra movement speed, so that's really good for running people down. She gets a ton of range with her rockets, which allows her to stay pretty far back. And she does a lot of AoE damage to multiple targets like Sivir does in team fights. She probably does even more than Sivir because she has longer range, and once you get your Infinity Edge plus your Hurricane, then those extra bolts can crit and just do an astronomical amount of damage in fights. She also has Zap, which is pretty nice. I mean, they've buffed this several times. It's 160% of your total AD. So early on, you'll have like maybe 80 AD. This thing's going to hit for like 150, 160, and it only costs 50 mana. It's on an 8-second cooldown. So if you're really proficient at hitting these zaps, and it has like almost 1500 range. So if you're really good at hitting these zaps, or your support has a lot of CC or something like that, then and you can combo that together with Zap, it's really strong. Flame Chomper, speaking of combos, if your team comes in and ganks or your support lands, you know, their CC chain or whatever, Flame Chompers can root somebody for an extra 1.5 seconds as well, which is really nice. So she's got a pretty good burst damage from her abilities for someone who attacks so well with her base auto attacks as well. Just for saying so many as well as there. But yeah, you know, your Leona goes in, you Flame Chomper some, auto attack, zap them, auto. They're probably going to die or flash at that point. So pretty strong. And then she has a very low cooldown ultimate that has great execution. So with this 90-second cooldown, you know, if anyone ever lands a CC chain, the enemy's dead. You know, once again, you just Flame Chomper, zap, auto, rocket, dead. Sometimes you can just rocket and it'll kill them. If it's like a Xayah or something that does really heavy damage. But definitely Zap plus Super Mega Death Rocket is really good. The Zap does apply a really large slow as well, so they're not going to be able to dodge the Super Mega Death Rocket unless they have Flash or some kind of dash available if you hit them with the Zap. And she can snipe free kills from across, you know, the map as well. It's a pretty short cooldown. You don't really need this for your kit to function very well. It's nice if you have it, but you can still work if you don't. So you can throw these Death Rockets across the map. It's got a pretty huge hitbox. So sometimes you can snipe out and get a few free kills that way. So yeah, really strong champ. You know, got good trading in lane early, good base damage on her zap, good wave clear. She is very vulnerable to ganks though. She doesn't have the spell shield like Sivir. She doesn't have the movement speed like Sivir unless you trigger a kill or an assist off of Get Excited. So she can get dove under towers. She can get engaged on by things like, you know, Nautilus, Thresh, Pike, Leona, those types of champs. So you ideally want somebody that has some pretty good peel. You know, she's great when she's paired together with like a Janna or a Lulu or, you know, a Thresh if he's actually peeling with his Flay. That type of stuff. So she is very good. She's really good at punishing if they have enchanters like Janna or, you know, Sona, things like that. depending on who your support is. But basically, if they don't have hard engage, you can take over the game late game. You know, if they're sitting there with their Janna, like, shielding their Ezreal or whatever in a team fight, and you're just getting to sit there and just fire away with your rockets, you're going to win that team fight most of the time. So she's really, really good at punishing some of these enchanter builds, which is why she has such a high win rate, probably. Because if you don't hard engage on her, she's going to outscale pretty much every other AD carry once she gets 3 or 4 items in team fights. So as long as she's got protection, she's going to be able to crush everybody probably because of the extreme range and the way that these rockets work. If you don't know how these rockets work, I've talked about this a ton in different videos, but basically with Fishbones and Hurricane, each bolt off of Hurricane turns into a rocket that does its own AoE damage and can crit and gets extra modifiers off of Infinity Edge with the crit. And so that's what's so strong. In a team fight, if there are 3 people together and you fire those Hurricane bolts, it not only one bolt hits each person, but it can splash, and each bolt can hit each other person. So 3 people in a team fight, you can get 9 hits. If there are 5 people grouped up together, you can get 15 hits off of this. Now, some of those hits are going to be the little, like, mini damage off of the Hurricane, but you can very quickly see how that starts to get insane when you're hitting people like 15 times and all that stuff can crit off of one auto attack in a team fight. So that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, you know, because I'll see some people getting, like, rapid fire cannon second on her. It's terrible. I don't know. I know Queen X has made the case before, an AD carry that I duo with sometimes has made the case that you do get the extra range, which lets you get that first hit, which is pretty nice, you know, with her. But Hurricane is just way, way too strong to give up. It's just way too strong. So maybe you could go, like, maybe rapid fire second or something, but I still think that Hurricane, it's just that interaction with the Pow Pow rockets is just too strong. Yeah, I mean, pretty much everybody, as you can see, it's just Hurricane. Static Shiv's another really good one because that does really nice crit AoE damage. I mean, Arrow did go. He went a really weird build. He's probably just trying that out. As you can see, pretty much everybody has Infinity Edge Hurricane. Now, you can go Rapid. It looks like a lot of people like Rapid as third. So you get that extra hit, and that is pretty nice, especially if you take Fleet. You know, Rapid, once again, lowers your Fleet cooldown by 25%, so you can get that extra movement speed. But I think it's by and large, it has to be Hurricane second. 73% of the time, it's going to be Hurricane. So that's what I would get on her. Jinx, going to be really strong. Then you just go Lethal Tempo, Coup de Grace, Alacrity, Footwear, Biscuits. Now, you can go if you're if they have a really good poke lane, so if they have like a Karma or a Yuumi on the other side, and you don't have a healer on your team, you have like a Janna or something bot lane, and you might need to go Fleet, and you might need to take Dorian Shield. But if you can afford it, Lethal Tempo is going to be really strong. What are you doing, dear?
Looking at your outlets.
I say. Then it's Berserker Greaves, Infinity Edge, Hurricane, Rapid Fire. Okay. Now, Caitlyn, it kind of pains me to put Caitlyn up this far, but realistically, she is starting to become very good, and it's not because of the 2 AD that she got the buff on. I mean, I guess that helps a little bit, but it's really just the meta is shaping up better for Caitlyn now than it has in the past because there's so many lane-dominant supports that are coming up right now, especially Karma. I think Karma is fairly sleeper OP right now. I've been winning a lot with her in lane. I did underestimate her on the recent support tier list. I brought her back into like tier 3. She had been off the tier list for a while. I wasn't sure just how much the buffs would impact her. I knew they were very good, but holy crap, are they really, really good. Like that 2.5 movement speed with non-decaying, like 2.5 seconds of non-decaying movement speed is just tremendous. It just helps you get out of so many different situations. And like her mana costs are basically free with Karma in the laning phase. Like everything's so cheap, you know, even when you're leveling up your Q to do like damage, it only ends up being like 5 extra mana per level, and her shield is only 5 extra mana per level, whereas a lot of other champs are 10 extra mana per level. So she can just spam her abilities over and over and over again. Has great harass. That's what Caitlyn's good at. You know who else does that? Yuumi. And Yuumi is also really popular. Now, Yuumi doesn't have a huge win rate right now, but she is gaining in popularity. People are realizing that she's strong. But even aside from those two, if we look at the highest like pick rate champions here, you know, I guess Thresh is still up there. People are just going to play that champion no matter what. But like Lux is another one who's super popular right now, super powerful, getting a lot of press with the pro scene. A lot of people are picking Lux in pro. She's a very good poke all-in champion, so she's got the poke with the E, and then if you ever land your bind with a Q, Caitlyn sets a trap there, they're just dead. I mean, she's going to headshot net, headshot Q, ult, you dead. So those two together are extremely oppressive. Yuumi is very oppressive. If you land your Q, that should be a free Q that Caitlyn can land because you're going to slow the enemy by a ton. And she's still pretty good with things like Nautilus. When he does his CC chain, you drop down your trap, and then that allows you to do a huge amount of extra damage. And then you're still seeing like your Namis, your Janus, and stuff like that. So the pick rate, you know, a lot of those supports are going to be very good with Caitlyn, but then also like the win rate champs. Now these are very good with Caitlyn. So classic, good Sona, Caitlyn, just huge poke, sustain, lane dominant, Janna, pretty good. The fact that Caitlyn, if she's building correctly, should be getting a lot of AD, a lot of crit, pretty decent with Janna. So she's just really good with a lot of the supports that are popular out there right now. I mean, she's good with most supports. But anything that applies a ton of extra lane pressure and can help her get those plates and start accelerating the game is great. So she really prefers, you know, hard pushing, sort of hard domination in the laning phase. And you have to play her as such. So if you're going to play Caitlyn, she has the ability to be one of the most oppressive AD carries in the game. But you have to play her that way. You have to have an aggressive mindset. You have to play her much more like a Draven than you would like an Ezreal. Okay, so you have to be using that range. If you're not using the 650 auto attack range, you are paying a lot for that. That is a very high premium in terms of balance. If you think about like each champion kind of has a budget and like some of their abilities are like, you know, cost so much, you know, that type of thing. That's how balance works, right? She's not good at some other things, but she is very, very good at long range. So you have to use it or there's just no point in playing her. So, for instance, she doesn't have any attack speed steroids in her kit. That means she does not scale very well later on into the game. You know, as most other major AD carries have something that boosts up their attack speed, right? She doesn't have any of that. Nothing boosts her attack speed. Nothing gives her extra AD. Nothing. Her ult is not really useful in combat. It's only for sort of chasing people down or poking people out at the end. Pretty weak ultimate. Unless you are really far ahead and poking them out. So that means that she has to dominate early because she's going to get outscaled by Sivir, Jinx, pretty much everybody. Now, really late game, if you're very good at positioning, she can still, you know, throw down a ton of damage at like 4 items. But historically, people describe her as really strong on 1 item and like not that great on 2nd and 3rd, but good on the 4th item. And the reason for that is she just scales so poorly with attack speed because her base attack speed is very slow. It's only 0.56, which is way slower than most other AD carries. I think Vayne's like a 0.66 or something. So she has like, I don't know what the number is, like 20% more or something like that attack speed. But then later on, as she gets like more raw AD, as she gets, you know, Infinity Edge plus Rapid Fire Cannon plus Static Shiv, all that stuff, then her range comes back into play again, and she's very good at sieging with the traps. So pretty good in like the super late game, but kind of weak in the mid game. So you need to play her aggressively. You need to be using the 650 auto attack range. You need to be using these traps effectively. So many Caitlyn's don't use these traps. I mean, you should make it very difficult for the enemy to get on you. As if Caitlyn is played correctly, it is so tough as Nautilus or Thresh or anybody to get on the Caitlyn, because if she has a trap in front of her and you try to hard engage, you're going to get stopped by that trap. And then she's going to do a ton of damage to you. And then if she puts you under tower and she's dropping those traps all around where you want to step to try to last hit the minions, it can be very disruptive and very difficult to deal with. So trap usage is very important. And if you do land the trap, remember the combo. Like, it has to be, you know, headshot, net backwards while you're netting backwards, and you start your animation for the Q. And then as soon as you land, you're going to throw the Q at them and then get a second headshot on them. That's a full combo. It's not good enough when they step on a trap just to get a headshot. You know, sometimes that's what you have to do if it's really long distance, if you're not close enough to net them. But you should learn how to do the full combo, right? Which is the, you know, headshot, net, Q, headshot. You, at the very least, you should be Qing them and then headshotting them. Because remember, like, if someone is revealed by Yordle's Snap Trap, then they take full damage. So even if you throw the Q through minions, they're still taking the full damage. And this does a lot of damage. A lot of damage. She has really high burst. So she's a lot closer to, like I said, like a Draven or a Jhin or something like that if you're playing her correctly, if you're getting these headshots off. It does a ton of damage. So that's 170% of your total AD. Not bonus AD, total AD. So that is a ton of damage off this Piltover. And then this, the headshot does extra damage. So it can do up to 240 damage with 100% of your bonus AD. That's in addition to the normal headshot damage. Remember, that doesn't replace headshot damage. That's on top of this, which is 125% of your bonus AD. And then you get extra if you have Infinity Edge increased up to this amount against non-trap champions. So it's basically dealing 100% of your AD plus 125% of your crit strike chance is bonus AD. And I'm pretty sure the headshot can crit as well. I don't know if this bonus damage can crit. I doubt the bonus crits, but it might. It's a lot of damage. It's a lot of damage if they're stepping on these traps. So you really, really, really have to make use of those traps. So yeah, if you're taking over the lane, she does have really good push. Not quite as good as Sivir, but probably on par with like Jinx early on with your Piltover Peacemaker. That can get a little expensive, but you definitely want to rush Infinity Edge on her and then Rapid Fire Cannon because that's going to allow you to get that extra range for the headshot. And then after that, you know, most people are going to go something like Static Shiv. That's pretty good. I don't know. I think realistically you could go for something like another Infinity Edge or an Essence Reaver or something like that, but the attack speed is pretty good on her. I'd probably just go Static Shiv, I suppose, after that, but Critical Strike and AD are both really strong on her, so I think if you're like mega rich, you might consider getting a second Infinity Edge or an Essence Reaver, kind of like what Jhin does, but she does scale with attack speed a little bit better than Jhin. But yeah, just really solid, good push in lane, good sort of zone control with the snap traps. If you're using them correctly, 90 caliber net can get you out of a lot of sticky situations. Good combo champion, but once again, just straight auto attacks without comboing stuff, without landing traps or landing nets, things like that. She's going to be pretty weak. So you need to practice her, you need to get pretty good, but I think she can be very oppressive. Pretty bad matchup into Sivir, though, because Sivir can step on your traps and get free mana. But pretty good against most other champs. So just Fleet Footwork, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, and then Footwear and Biscuits. You can, I have seen some Caitlyn's taking things like Press the Attack or Lethal Tempo. I think that's pretty bad because she doesn't have very high attack speed. I think you just want the Fleet so you can just reposition, get a little bit of extra healing. It scales really well with Rapid Fire, which is what you'll want early on in your build. So, and you're not going to get a lot of lifesteal, so I think that Fleet's probably the place to be. You can also do Bloodthirster after Rapid Fire if you want to do that instead. But I think most people do another crit item. Then just Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire, Bloodthirster, or Static Shiv, depending on what's going on. But yeah, she can be very good, but there will be a lot of bad Caitlyn's out there, but some of them will be good if they're well practiced on her. Okay, Twitch. I think Twitch is probably the most underrated AD carry right now. He does have a pretty high win rate. I think he's... Isn't he like third highest among popular AD carries? Yeah. So, really good, decent play rate at 3.1%. I don't really count the things like Quinn in there very much, or like Nico, because they're just not played very much, but, or like Taric AD carry or Swain. But yeah, Twitch is going to be pretty good. Now, there are several things about Twitch that I always mention that make him a unique AD carry and pretty good for solo queue in general. He's always like the second AD carry that I recommend as a one-trick. The main reason for that is camouflage. This is like anything that's invisible is really, really strong in solo queue because people never respect it. A lot of people don't buy pinks or control wards, as they're called these days, and they really don't respect when he's not on the map. So that means you can just sneak up on people and get a ton of free kills. So even if you fall behind in the lane, which is likely as Twitch, you're not going to be that great. All you have to do is just sneak up in the mid game. Just keep it close, you know, stay within 15, 20 CS in the laning phase. Try not to die. And in the mid game, someone will give you an opportunity. You know, you're going to be able to roam with your invisibility, turn a fight around somewhere, or pick off somebody. and get back into the game. So really, this invisibility is just so powerful. And if you do actually get ahead for some reason, if your support's playing really well and sets you up for a couple of good kills in the laning phase, it's pretty much lights out. Because he can just use that advantage so much. Everyone has to constantly be scared of him on the map, because no one just ever knows where he's going to be. So he stays invisible forever. I mean, I think this is what you max out second on Twitch these days, and even at level 1, it's still 10 seconds of invisibility. Like, that's a really long time for him to be able to run around the map. And don't forget, in team fights too, whenever you get kills, you can turn invisible again and reposition. So if you're getting dove by somebody, you know, and you get a kill or an assist, you can go invisible. Like, just press your Q, get away. You can even flash away if you have to. But just reposition, then you could open back up again on them after that. Or you can use this to run people down as well after you get a couple of kills. So the resets are really strong, and I don't see a lot of AD carries using that. But that's the most notable thing about him, is the invisibility just allows him to get back in the game. And you can hang out in team fights just on the periphery, just kind of chill and wait invisible while the rest of your team sets up the fight. And then after you notice that they use some big cooldowns, like maybe Vi ults your mid laner or something instead of you, or maybe Sejuani uses her ult on your support or whatever, then you come out of invisibility and blow them all up. So you just kind of sit there and just wait on them to use a couple of their key cooldowns, and then you show up and clean everything up after that. So ambush is really strong, and then his spray and parry is excellent, does great AoE damage in team fights, has really long range, 850 total range with this. Each one of these bolts can crit. It also triggers Blade of the Ruined King, and it can trigger Hurricane bolts as well. So it's just tons and tons and tons of damage that you do off of that spray and pray. And right now, typically he goes for Blade of the Ruined King first, although you can go Infinity Edge first if you're really far ahead. Infinity Edge plus Hurricane is going to do a lot more damage, but Blade of the Ruined King is going to give you the sustain in the laning phase. And I mean, both of them are good with Hurricane. It's always Hurricane second. But Blade of the Ruined King, each one of the bolts off of Hurricane will trigger the Blade of the Ruined King healing and the percentage damage, but it can also crit with Infinity Edge. So you always want those three items, you know, Blade of the Ruined King, Hurricane, and Infinity Edge. But whether you get Infinity first or Blade of the Ruined King first kind of depends on the matchup. I think most people do Blade, but both of them are fine. And then your Contaminate, you know, does a lot of extra damage as well. So if they do manage to survive your ultimate, they're all going to be contaminated, and you get to do a ton of extra bonus AD off of this. Now, thing about Twitch, though, is he is very, very vulnerable to all-in. You know, stuff like Nautilus is really popular right now. Vi is really popular. Sejuani's popular. So if they get on top of you, you're going to have a problem because you don't have any mobility, hardly. Like, your Q does give you some speed, but you don't have any dashes. You don't have any way to get people off of you. So he's best paired with someone who has good peel. You know, someone like a Nami, someone like a Janna, even Karma with that movement speed can help out a lot. Yuumi is another one that is specifically really, really strong with Twitch, and I don't see this combination enough, but whenever he goes invisible, Yuumi can go with him, and she's also invisible. And so you can just roll up on people and use Yuumi's ult. They're going to be stunned, and then Twitch gets a free kill off of that. And it's just like, it's free money every time, you know, on like a, I don't know, minute and a half cooldown once Yuumi gets some CDR behind her. So you don't even have to ult with Twitch if you don't want to a lot of the time. It's just Yuumi goes in there and ults, and it's over. So that's a really, really powerful interaction there for a solo queue that a lot of people don't use. Yuumi also throws out a lot of poke herself in the laning phase, and she's got that heal. So, and she likes to get things like Ardent Sensor, which are really good on Twitch. So, and then just in team fights in general, you're just able to stun everybody with Yuumi, and then he ults and kills everybody. So that's a really, really good combination for solo queue, and Yuumi is very popular right now. So I think overall it's still going to be very strong. So weaker in the laning phase, you know, than some of the higher picks up there. You know, not going to be as strong as like Caitlyn, Jinx, Draven, Sivir, pretty much anybody. I mean, he's kind of on par with Ezreal, I guess, but most other AD carries, he's going to be a lot weaker in the laning phase. But he does have that invisibility, and that is invaluable if you're using it correctly in solo queue. So if you just survive the laning phase, he is strong enough to make that push in the mid game to take over. Okay, next up, Xayah. So I have Xayah a bit higher than maybe some other people would have, but I think she is very good because she's pretty versatile as well, and she's really good against divers. So, you know, things like Vi, things like Nautilus. She is really good with her ult to be able to get out a lot of those things because it makes you untargetable for 1.5 seconds. Now, I'm not sure on the Nautilus what happens if you ult right when his ult's about to hit you. The missile might wait below until you land. I think it cancels it, though, but I'd have to look that up. But I'm pretty sure with Vi, if you ult whenever she tries to ult you, then it'll cancel Vi's ult. So she does have some ways to get out of that stuff. She has really good peel as well, self-peel with Blade Caller. So if you just throw down a bunch of your feathers with your Q and then your auto attacks, your Deadly Plumage to give you that extra bonus movement speed, then it makes it very, very difficult to dive her. She does a ton of damage. Once you get like a couple of crit items, once you get, you know, like Phantom Dancer plus Essence Reaver, then you can completely delete some people that are trying to dive you. So really good damage in team fights because you stack up these feathers. Really good sort of evasion with her Feather Storm. So she's just one of the better AD carries at team fighting, considering how much safety she also brings in. So she's a lot safer against dives. If you're wondering when should I pick her versus when should I pick another team fight AD carry like a Jinx, she's safer than Jinx, but she has less range. But I think she puts out similar damage. If you're using her correctly, if you're getting that Blade Caller spike damage in. Obviously very good with Rakan, who has been winning a lot more lately in general, but, you know, a lot of people still don't play Rakan optimally, but she can still be really good with him, is popular. Very good with things like Karma. She does have nice wave clear with your double daggers and then clean cuts in the laning phase. You can push them in. Her poke is not as great as some of the champions out there like Sivir or Jinx. Because she is fairly short range. She's only 525 range. And your only real poke is like your double dagger. So she's much more of an all-in type of champ. Like kite back and peel. But nevertheless, still going to be very, very strong champion. Great critical strike. Great safety overall. So I'd recommend going for Lethal Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace. You just want to get those feathers down as fast as possible with Lethal Tempo. Then I think Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge is where a lot of people go with her. I like Essence Reaver first for a similar reason as it is with Sivir, in that she has really powerful cooldowns. You want that ult cooldown up as much as possible. And she has really good wave clear if you have a lot of mana. So just being able to spam your Q or your W and then use clean cuts to just zip right through those minion waves can give you a lot of priority in lanes and let you rotate around the map and do some other important things. So very strong champion, obviously really strong with Rakan, but pretty good with other supports as well. Then Ezreal, it kind of pains me to put Ezreal back up here, but realistically, he is a very good champion, for being honest, if you're good on him. There are just so many bad Ezreals, and I think a lot of it is kind of the autofill aspect of him. Change that over to Georgia there. There we go. But he is very difficult to play, but, you know, at high levels, he has still played a lot in pro. There are a lot of different builds you can get on him. So there are so many different ways you could mess up Ezreal in terms of, like, builds, positioning. You notice his win rate is not insane. It's 51%, but he is one of the best sort of do-it-yourself AD carries. If you do one-trick him, you know, he can be exceptionally strong. A lot of people are kind of moving more towards sort of these AP hybrid type of builds with, like, Hex Tech. So, like, going Gauntlet. So, Muramana first. You always get Tier on your first back. And then you kind of have some choices after that. You can finish your Manamune, or you can start working your Iceborne Gauntlet. But you always want some combination of these, the Muramana, Iceborne. Then after that, you have a couple of options. Some people go with the Blade of the Ruined King. This is pretty good against tanks. This gives you extra kiting as well. Gives you that little bit of extra speed, which is going to be pretty handy. Don't forget your Qs do apply, Blade of the Ruined King. So this is kind of the traditional build with him, and then eventually you get like a Lord Dominik's or a Mortal Reminder or something like that. He does have a little bit more of an AP-centric build, so this is going to give you more burst damage. If you go Ludens, this is supposed to be a substitute for the old Seraph's build, where you'd go double-tier items. You can't do that anymore. But this is not quite the same, but it's close. It doesn't give you the shield, but it does give you the extra CDR and it gives you the extra mana, which, you know, scales with the Mura mana, and you get that burst damage. So when you hit somebody with that Q, you're going to get the Luden's poke. So nice burst damage. And then some people, instead of Blazer King, have been going Hextech Gunblade. This is more expensive, but he does utilize the AD and the AP really well. It does give you 15% of all damage dealt, including magic damage. The Lightning Bolt is pretty good. It's a lot better earlier on in the game. It does apply as slow, though, just like Blazer and King. So if you're rich, that can be a pretty good option. You can also go Trinity sometimes. I think Iceborne is better most of the time, but Trinity is still okay. You're going to be a lot squishier, but it will do more single target burst if you do that. So some of the things that make Ezreal really good, first of all, he's super safe. In theory, he should be very safe. So you have your Q, which allows you to farm from a really long distance. It opens up a lot of possibilities if you're a proficient Ezreal player for the rest of your team as well. Because this allows, if you have like a roaming support on your team, like an Alistar or a Thresh or something like that, this will allow them to roam like in the jungle or mid lane or whatever, and you should be able to farm safely from the bot lane without feeding, in theory. So you can farm from almost 1200 back on a really low cooldown. If you're actually hitting these, it does quite a bit of damage. I mean, it only costs 40 mana and does 115 base with 110% of your total AD. So, you know, your Qs are going to be hitting for like, I don't know, 300, 400 in the mid to late game for only 40 mana, and they end up being, especially after all of your CDR, on like a 2-second cooldown. So it's really, really efficient, just unlimited poke. So very good with things like, you know, like a Lux, a Xerath, Ziggs, Karma, a lot of these other poke type of lanes, Nico. It's going to make him very, very strong. Essence Flux. This is what kind of determines a lot of good Ezreals from bad Ezreals, is you have to hit the Essence Flux plus Mystic Shot combo. You have to be able to throw out the WQ to do that massive spike damage. This can do upwards of, you know, an additional 400 or 500 damage. So if you hit the Q on that, I mean, you're going to be like WQ combo. You're going to be hitting people for like 1,000 damage. In the mid to late game. And the thing, like, there's virtually no counterplay to Ezreal at a certain point as well, right? Like, the only counterplay is the enemy team, like, dashes into you and forces a fight and kills the rest of your team, and then they eventually run you down. Because when you get Iceborne Gauntlet, you can kite people so easily with Mystic Shot. You just Q, they're going to be slowed, run away, you know, E to get away, auto attack Q, E to get away. They're not going to be able to catch you. Because every time you land Mystic Shot, it lowers the cooldown by 1.5 seconds on your other abilities. If you are, I think people often will max Arcane Shift second. And so this goes down to 13 seconds. With 40% CDR, it goes down to like 7 seconds. And then every single one of these Qs you land is going to reduce it by 1.5 seconds. So really the cooldown on Arcane Shift, if you're a decent Ezreal player, is like 3 seconds. So you're just, it's always going to be up. You're always going to get away from people. And then this is up pretty much all the time, too. It's 120 seconds base, but once again, it's reduced by CDR, and every time you hit Q, it gets reduced also. And it's any enemy, not just enemy champion. So if you're queuing like minions, it still lowers the cooldown on this. So this is up. It feels like every 30 seconds, the mid to late game. Has pretty good wave clear. It does less damage than it used to as far as wave clear goes, but it can do full damage to enemies now, so, or like enemy champions rather. So, you know, if you have like a team fight comp, you know, you've got your Jarvan, your Rumble, your you know, all of that kind of stuff, your Kennen, then like throwing through that barrage near the start of a fight can just completely delete enemies. So he has really, really good upfront damage with the True Shot barrage combo together with other CC. Pretty good burst if you land your Essence Flux and then you Q, and if they're about dead, use your Arcane Shift to finish them off. That's a lot of damage. Although don't E forward most of the time as Ezreal. So it's all there. I mean, his numbers are crazy. They're really high. He has very long range, very long poke. He's extremely safe. He can get a lot of armor off of Iceborne Gauntlet and Ninja Tabby. So it makes it very difficult to burst him out as far as like AD assassins like Rengar, Kha'Zix, Talon, stuff like that. Like they can still get him, but it's going to be a lot harder to get him than most other AD carries out there. So really, really good. So what's the problem then? Well, the problem is you have to actually hit your Qs. So you have to hit a lot of Qs. Not only do you have to hit your Qs, but you have to hit your Ws. in order to do that burst damage later on, and you have to somehow have enough self-control to not E forward into melee combat with the Yasuo or something like that. I say it tongue-in-cheek, but this happens all the time, even among like high-level, you know, like Diamond, Ezreal, like one tricks that we see. They'll just they'll overestimate their damage and they'll E forward, and they'll end up dying. And so that's a problem. You have to have self-control and patience. You have to have the patience of a poke champion. I mean, it's death by 1,000 pinpricks most of the time when you're playing Ezreal. It's not Draven. You do not run up and just auto-attack people a lot. It's all about positioning and patience and precision. So that's something that a lot of League players are very short on. So that's kind of his issue. But if you're really good on him, he can definitely take over. He does fit into most team comps. I did bump him up a little bit here just because he is particularly good with Yuumi and Karma and those kind of poke champions who are coming back into the meta in a big way right now. Yumi's been here for about a patch or so, but Karma, I think a lot of people are really underestimating Karma right now. I underestimated her, and I do a lot of research on these things, and I think she's extremely good right now. Her, you know, win rate is not like astronomical yet, but if you look at the chart here, look at this. This was when the patch came out on 6/11. Remember, this is, you know, this thing that I'm looking at is only the last 2 weeks of Karma. So that only includes like less than 1 week of patch. 49% win rate before 6/11. After 6/11, 53% win rate. Pretty much from there on out. Her pick rate's gone up a lot too. But yeah, that's quite the jump. It's a 4% jump off of those Karma buffs. So yeah, he's really good with Karma. So kind of like Caitlyn, really difficult to play, but if you do master him, he can definitely be worth it. He's really fun too. I mean, I like playing him. He is cool. So like Klepto, Magical Footwear, Dematerializer, Cosmic, and then Mana Flow and Transcendence. Then either Ninja Tabby or Mercury Treads. I would say pretty much never Berserker Greaves. Like the greedy build you can get with him is Ionian Boots, which will eventually give you 20 AD. Because Transcendence will, you know, translate that over into AD. And then Muramana, Iceborne Gauntlet, Ruined King. I like the Blade of the Ruined King build. You know, you can go for the Ludens if you want to. You can go for the other thing if you want to. I'd have to research and see when you want to do one of those. I mean, basically, if you're going for the AP build, if you're going for the Luden stuff, you're looking for burst, right? So you're looking to, like, you have to be able to land that W and then just, you know, burst people out quickly, right? But if you're going against tanks or if it's going to be a longer fight or you just need to play extra safe, then I think Blade of the Ruined King is just going to be a lot more consistent than some of those other things out there. So it's up to you, but I think that he is really good. If you are super good on him, he can definitely be tier 1, but tier 2 is as high as I can put him in good conscience right now, just because there are a lot of people that aren't good, not only anecdotally that I see in my games, but just like statistically. You know, he's like the second lowest win rate, 80 carry or something right now, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad. I mean, Yumi's got a low win rate too, and I think most reasonable people will tell you Yuumi is really good right now. But it is definitely something to consider. The potential is there, but he's arguably the hardest 80 carry to play at a fully optimal level just because there's so many skill shots and positional things you can do. Don't forget one final thing with his Arcane Shift is that you can actually, if you're going to get hit by something, you can still shift out of it just like a Tristana W, and that it buffers. So like you'll see a lot of times like at really high level 80 carries like Double Lift or something, if Blitz is going to hit him with the hook, then he'll like he'll start his Arcane Shift right when the hook's going to hit. He'll get partially pulled and then he'll still jump out of it. So like really good Ezreals can do that to where they buffer the E and then they still jump out of it. So if you get really good at that, that's kind of some next level stuff. But if you can do that, then he becomes like virtually impossible to catch. Okay, Xayah. Kai'Sa's another one kind of like Ezreal that doesn't have a great win rate, but is also super popular, like 50% popularity right now. She does have very good scaling, and she is also kind of versatile like Ezreal. So that's good if you know how to use that versatility, but that also creates a lot of traps for people who don't really understand how you should be sort of playing this character, right? I should probably, let's just move this over here. We don't really need those notes. I'm not really using the notes anyways. Let's leave this over here, and then we can see the abilities, and we can see this over here with the sort of the champion stuff. I think that's probably a better setup. But Xayah has been nerfed a lot. She is okay in the laning phase, she's not amazing. She's fairly short range at 525. She doesn't have a lot of poke. Her Q, if you land it, does do pretty decent damage, 150% of your AD. So it's kind of like Jinx's Zap, in that if you land that Q, it does do quite a bit, but it's pretty slow moving. You can't throw it around minions. It's on a long cooldown, but if you land it, that does help. Now, there are a couple of different builds on her. Some people were trying out the, like this Manamune build. And I don't know about that. Like, it feels really slow to me, and it requires a lot of planning and a lot of sort of macro knowledge. As you can see, not everyone's doing that build. I guess this guy, Spirit's doing, like, jungle. So there are still people that are doing, like, the Stormrazor build. It's kind of split. There's a lot of different, like, options here. I guess more people are doing Manamune than not. So that has edged out Stormrazor a little bit. So here's the thing with these builds, okay? So Gensu's is always second item, so everyone always gets Gensu's second. You don't want to get it first because you need another multiplier to make it worth it. A lot of what this comes down to is, how do you want Kai'Sa's Evolves to unfold? Okay, so the Mirror Mana, the real reason people get this, it's not for the mana, that's okay. The real reason that people get this item is because this can help you evolve your Q really quickly if you do it correctly. Okay, so it's only 2,400 gold to complete this item, and then you get a pickaxe towards your Gensu's Rage Blade, and that will be enough to evolve. I think you can even get it before, I'd have to do the math on it, but I believe you can even evolve before you complete the Mirror Mana, before you entirely transform it. I think you just have to have the base item, and then like a Doran's Blade and a pickaxe, and you get it. So this allows you the fastest Q evolve possible, and that's why a lot of people started doing it, because it gets it about 800 gold faster, because otherwise you have to complete Stormrazor first, I believe. You complete Stormrazor, and then you get a pick. You might actually be able to evolve your Q once you complete Stormrazor. I don't remember the exact parameters of it, but the way that I looked it up, you know, a few patches ago when this build first came out, like on a Reddit post and things like that, it basically came out to, you get your Q evolve 800 gold faster, which allows you to have a much stronger power spike. But the trade-off to this is the components of this item, the tier particularly, is really bad in the laning phase. So what this means is a lot of people end up going pick on Kai'Sa first, and then you get your completed Mirror Mana after that on your second back. So this requires really good CSing, first of all, so you're going to be on point so you can get these items at the correct timing windows, then also enough knowledge and sort of pressure in the lane to be able to get the back on your terms when you want to get the back. So basically what it comes down to is you have to get your pick, and then you have to like force a back right when you get your pick, and then come back to lane before the enemy gets their BF sword most of the time, or their cutlass or Bilgewater or whatever. It's really important that you do that, because if you come back with a pick and they come back with the BF sword, they're obviously going to be very far ahead of you. And so you have to really skew the timing windows, because most AD carries just kind of mindlessly just farm, and then once they get their BF sword, then they go back, and that's it, right? You can't do that. You have to force a back when you get a pick, and then you have your advantage. And then you give them a bad back. So you can take Kai'Sa with teleport to help you out with this if you have something like a Yuumi on your team. And that can be really nice, because then you can back pretty much anytime you want, get your pick, and immediately come back to lane. But otherwise, you're going to have to push up on a cannon wave and back sort of in a bush where they don't see you, and then come back to lane before they get that BF. Because then they have a choice. If you can do that properly, you come back with a pickaxe, and they're going to be sitting there with like 1,000 gold, and they're going to be like, well, crap. Do I wait for my BF sword, or do I go ahead and back and get a pickaxe too? So that's the kind of choice you want to put them on. And most people will greed out and wait for the BF swords. That means you're going to have a pickaxe, and they're only going to have a Doran's Blade. And that should give you a good like 3 to 5 minutes there where you can really pressure them in lane and just not allow them to back. Or if they do back, they're going to take, you're going to get a tower plate or two, and you're going to deny some CS under the tower. So it just requires a lot of like specialized game knowledge and timing windows to make that build work. Versus Stormrazor is so much easier, because you just go back and get the BF sword at the same time they do. And you sort of work your way towards this item naturally. So that's really what it comes down to. And that's why this build seems to fail a lot in solo queue, because people don't do that timing window correctly. But it's pretty good in pro because they know how to optimize and sort of build their team around that to make that happen. So you either go Mana Immune or Storm Razor, then Gensu's, and then a lot of people are going Nashor's Tooth after that. It's pretty good, gives you a lot of attack speed, gives you some on-hit damage, a little bit of AP, pretty nice in the build. You can also go Hurricane, particularly if you're going for the Storm Razor build. Your energized attacks deal 50 bonus magic damage on hit. I'm not sure if Hurricane like procs those on their bolts or not, but that's typically, if you're going for the Storm Razor build, it's Hurricane third. If you're going for the Muramana build, then it's going to be Nashor's Tooth third. But there is some flexibility in there. You know, you can sneak in an Hourglass if you need to. But that's about as sneaky as I would get. I would pretty much just get most of these items right here. So, pretty good. Decent lane pressure. When you do get the mana off of your Mana Immune, it does allow you to push really well with your Q, but she is short range. It's hard to poke with that Q. You have to get people isolated, which once again, positionally can be kind of tricky, can be a little risky. But she does have great scaling. She's really good against tanks. So I think she's a great replacement for Vayne after the Vayne nerfs because she does max percentage health. She can reposition with her E pretty easily. She can reposition with her R. She's just really fast in general, like super fast attack speed, and then the Gensu's plus the Nashors. I have seen some people get a Blade of the Ruined King on her. That build, like rushing Blade of the Ruined King into Gensu's, doesn't work out that well most of the time, but you could get a Blade of the Ruined King as a later item instead of Nashors or something if you wanted to, but most people do Nashors. But yeah, she can be pretty good. She's just really hard to play optimally, and even in like a pro setting here, 52% is not not super high these days compared to some of these other champs. I don't know what Sivir's is. 67%. 67% among challengers. It's just so OP, it's ridiculous. I think Jinx is even higher. You don't see Jinx a ton in like pro games, but yeah, Jinx is even 56%. So yeah, Kai'Sa's been falling off pretty hard, even among challengers, but she is versatile like that, where she can go AP or AD if you need it. She can break tanks. Like, she's got a lot of different stuff she can do, and so that's why she's still played in pro, and a lot of challengers still like her. But I just go press the attack, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Biscuits. Then if you can time it correctly, do the Mana Immune. If not, Storm Razor, then Gensu's, Nashor, Hurricane. Okay, final couple of champions, and we'll wrap it up here. We've got Kog'Maw. Now, I think that Kog'Maw is sneaking in and is a lot better than a lot of people think. I did get asked about Kog'Maw on stream. His win rate is going up a lot. And, you know, a big reason for this is that there's just so many, like, Ardent Sensor Peeler supports that are coming back in that I keep talking about. And specifically Karma and Lulu are very, very good with Kog'Maw. Because, like, what Kog'Maw needs is speed. Because he doesn't have any speed-up abilities, so people can get away from him when he turns on his W, especially in the laning phase. And then they just wait till that's on cooldown, and then he's very vulnerable for an additional, you know, however long. Right? Like 8 seconds before it comes back off cooldown. His W does a tremendous amount of damage. I mean, every auto attack is 6% of the person's maximum health, and he gets a lot of range off of that. So he gets up to 210 bonus attack range. So he's like 700 range. But when he doesn't have that up, then he's only 500 range. So you really have to kill people within this 8-second window of time. It's kind of like Twitch, who has like 5 seconds with his ult in a team fight. But a lot of people, especially in the laning phase, you turn this on, they're going to run away. Unless you have something like a Lulu, or specifically a Karma, who can shield and speed him up for 2.5 seconds now so that he can chase them down and keep auto-attacking them. Because most people can't trade with you when you're doing this extra damage, and you get that extra range. It's really hard to trade. Now, he does gain some extra bonus attack speed off his Q, and he has some poke with that. It's not on that long of a cooldown. It's pretty cheap. It's actually surprisingly some pretty good poke. But you max that second. You always max your Bio Arcane Barrage first, I think. Although, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty good poke. Maybe there's an argument for getting 3 points of this in lane. It does add some resistance shredding, but I still think you max Bio Arcane. This is your second one. But it's like decent poke in the laning phase. Void Ooze is like a really janky kind of slow, which is okay. Living Artillery does give you some poke. It becomes pretty mana expensive, though, pretty quickly. You have to wait, I forgot how, it's like 8 seconds for this to fall off. So you can land 1 or 2 poke if you get good with this to kind of finish people off or harass them under tower. But most of what it is, you just turn on W and right-click and just delete people, pretty much. And I believe he's still going to go for Blade the Ruined King into Ginsu's. I honestly have not seen a Kog'Maw in ages. It's possible he could do Wits. Yeah. It's like a lot of people are kind of going for Wits here. He does have a good win rate at high elo. Now, I did see some people messing around with this Hail of Blades for like better laning pressure. Some people are doing that. Maybe if you have a Karma or something and you can really take advantage of that. Hey, thanks, Keegan. I appreciate the sub. Maybe that's okay, but I still like Lethal Tempo. It just scales so well later on into the game. And it looks like people might be not doing Ginsu's. I don't know. It feels like Ginsu's is so strong because every third hit does proc your W more often. Although, you know, it was nerfed a while ago. Yeah, Ginsu's is still really popular. So, yeah, I still think it's Blade into Ginsu's. And after that, you have some choices. Hurricane. I believe Hurricane might... I think it triggers your Bio-Arcane Barrage. So, in team fights, you do this bonus damage to everybody. So Hurricane's like super strong, but you could do Wit's End if they have a lot of magic damage champs or something. This would give you some healing as well. Yeah, I think this order right here that you see, Blather and King, Gensu's, Hurricane, and then Wits is probably where you want to be. I don't like the crit build. Some people do it. Like, it does work with Hurricane, but I'd rather just get a utility item after that. I'd rather have the Blather and King or their Wits End for some extra healing, some extra resistances. But yeah, I mean, if you have a champ that can give you that movement speed, like a Lulu, like a Karma, so that you can run people down or so you can kite people with the Bio-Arcane Barrage, if he just gets to sit there and fire, he's going to out DPS almost anybody. Especially, he's very, very good at shredding tanks as well because it's max health damage. So he's completely deletes people. I'm sure someone has seen a Kog'Maw. It's mega fed before. It's just really, really hard to deal with. Lulu specifically is very nice because... she gives attack speed, on-hit damage, and her ult can boost people up. So historically, Lulu is really good. Although I do think that Karma now is becoming very good too because that speed lasts for so long, the 2.5 seconds, on such a low cooldown as well. So either way, I think he can be very good. And a difference here with Kog is in the laning phase with the movement speed, he can be very, very oppressive. So that's kind of a difference between him and... something like a Jinx or something like a Sivir, you know, who also scale pretty well, is that he does it with 0 items. You know, like, items are very good on him, but his base damage and his base range, whenever his W is up, is really tremendous. So, Kog'Maw can be good, very vulnerable, but he does scale super well, and he does a lot of magic damage. So if you have a lot of AD on your team, he's a good magic damage option if you don't want to do Kai'Sa. So, you know, if you have something like Yasuo top and Talon middle, and then you got your, like, Rengar jungle or something, then Kog'Maw could be a decent option there. So you can take the Hail of Blades. I think I'm going to switch this back over to the Lethal Tempo build. So just Lethal Tempo, Triumph. Alacrity, and Coup de Grace. Then just Footwear and Biscuits. And then I think just Berserker, Ruined King, Ginsu's. And then I think Hurricane probably after that. It's just so good in team fights. And we'll go ahead and bump that up to Georgia as well. Okay. But that gives him kind of a very unique kind of spot where he can be aggressive early. He does get that super range, and he's pretty good at cracking tanks and dealing magic damage. So I think that's, you know... he's becoming solidified as a decent sort of niche pick there if you have good protection for him. So I wouldn't pick him first pick blind pick, but if you have the, you know, if you have a support you can count on, or if you have a really good front line, like you got a Sejuani on your team, or a like a Malachi, maybe even a Darius, something like that, that can work out. All right, Lucian is the last one that I'll talk about here, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. good early game champ. I mean, has great burst damage with his combos. Scales really well off of one item. The Blatherin King is very strong on him. The problem is that second item is not usually as strong. A lot of people have been getting Black Cleaver on him historically with Lucian, but it's just not enough damage this day and age. Like the crit era, he doesn't use crit very well. So more and more people have been going towards Essence Reaver to try to like give him the crit, which once again, he's not as strong with crit as some of the other champs out there, but I think that does make him a lot stronger and a lot more competitive on 2 items. So it seems like it doesn't have a lot of synergy, right? Like it's like, okay, he's got Blatherin King, but then like the crit doesn't do anything with this. But you do get, if you compare this to like Black Cleaver, which is the other item that a lot of people will commonly get, it has 30 more AD on it. It's got 25% crit, still has the 20% cooldown reduction. The missing mana is relevant. That can let you wave clear a lot faster with your Q, but it's mostly you get, you know, the 30 AD and the 25% crit versus 400 health is what it comes down to. You do get the armor shred as well, so, you know, that is viable against tanks, but critical strike is also pretty good with tanks. And the thing is, like, after you get Essence Reaver, a lot of times you're going to want to get Infinity Edge. And so I think that that 3-item power spike, the Blatherin King plus Essence Reaver plus Infinity Edge, is where you want to be in terms of like huge damage. The issue with that is all those items are very expensive, so you're going to be a little behind the curve unless you get ahead early. But yeah, he's all right. You just have to slam the lane early and take over, and the issue is like it's really hard to do that against things like Sivir, like Caitlyn, like Draven, because they're going to be able to keep up with you early and they're going to scale a lot better later. And he has really short range, so he can get poked out and harassed pretty easily by things like Yumi or like Karma, Nami, even Sona. Like all these champs can harass him a lot better because he only has 500 range. Now, if he gets a hold of him, he can blow him up, you know, with his combos. But he just he doesn't have, like, he's a good lane bully at fighting, but like his like short range and his like relatively weak wave clear early on just makes it a bit more difficult to capitalize with him. And he's not as strong with a lot of the enchanters out there. Like he can use Ardent Censer, like his double shots are pretty good with it, but he just doesn't like apply any extra poke to help complement the Karma or the Yumi or the Nami or whatever. He's got a little bit, you know, with his W, but he's mostly like an all-in combo type of person. So he does still work very well with things like Braum and Nautilus. But overall, I just think the meta is kind of shifting away from him a little bit. I think the crit champions that have a lot more poke are good. And there's a lot more team fights going on as well, and he's relatively weak in team fights compared to other AD carries. Because when you think about, like, okay, Twitch is unloading with his ult, or like Jinx with Hurricane doing her thing, critting, Sivir, just getting all those ricochet bounces, critting everywhere. What's Lucian doing? He's just auto-attacking the tank that's in his face, you know, mostly. He's got his Qs, he's dashing around, he's mobile, but he's just not doing enough damage compared to those other champions. They're just going to run him over late game. Now, Ezreal also doesn't do a ton of damage to, like, the tank and stuff like that, but he is safer than Lucian, and he has the poke. So he's really good in, like siege comps and just, like, controlling zones so that you can, you know, get control of vision in areas or push people off a Baron or whatever. It's just that range on Ezreal makes up for the fact that his like sustained damage is low, versus Lucian's sustained damage in team fights is also low, but he doesn't have the range to compensate for it. But he's a very good duelist. I mean, if you can like crush the lane, bot lane, and get some 1v1s with people, he can be very good in those types of situations. But I think that style of play is really giving way to the team fight right now, with just how powerful some of these crit AD carries are, and with the kind of resurgence of tanks like Sejuani and some of these other like bruisery tank sort of champions are becoming a lot more popular, and he's just not as good into those. But if you do want to play him, press the attack, triumph, alacrity, coup de grace, then footwear, biscuits, and then just Berserker, Ruin King, Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge, Phantom Dancer. So it is a really powerful 3 items, but they're all very expensive because he doesn't have a Zeal item in there. But yeah, that's going to be it. The last few that I'll mention here, just really quickly. Miss Fortune is all right. She does have good team fight capabilities. I just feel like she just doesn't do as much raw damage, doesn't have as much poke as some of the other champions out there. So you can still make her work. She's still got a decent win rate, but feel like there could potentially be better choices, although she, like, her AoE damage is very nice with that ultimate. If you have something like a cannon or a Jarvan or an Amumu or something like that to lock people down, she can definitely still work. So she's kind of oddball out, but she can still be all right. Tristana is someone who's been climbing in priority quite a bit. She's very good when you're ahead, but she's pretty bad when you're behind. So, like, that rocket jump, being able to jump in and finish people off with the bombs. If you have a very aggressive jungler, it's going to camp bottom. So if you're, like, duoed with a jungler, or you just know this person's going to do really well and camp you bottom, she's one of the best snowballing AD carries out there, because it's almost impossible to get away from her if she can jump forward without paying any sort of penalty for that. She takes towers really quickly with her bombs. She's very safe in team fights. You know, she can buffer that W and jump out of almost anything. She's got her ult to knock people back. So she is very, very good. She has a great kit. She just takes a long time to come online, takes a lot of gold. Like, her base damages are pretty low in general, except for her ult, which is surprisingly pretty high. It's like 300 damage at level 6. But other than that, like, she has short range to start with, and if you get pushed in, it's almost impossible for you to farm under tower, because that explosive shot is going to do uneven damage to the creeps. And so it makes it really hard for both you to last hit and for the support to help you last hit. So there's that. And, you know, she doesn't do a lot of poke on her own. She's really just kind of an all-in champion in the laning phase. And so it's likely you're going to get pushed in by things like Caitlyn, like Sivir, Karma, all that stuff. So it is likely that you're going to be losing the lane and that you're going to have a hard time last hitting under tower. So it's a really risky pick, but it can pay off if you do really well. Jhin is still serviceable. He's all right. I feel like he takes a little while to come online. Like, he is pretty good with just the Infinity Edge. Really good pairing with Lux if you're constantly hitting your W after Lux hits her binds. So he definitely has some potential there. It's just, he's not as good against tanks. He can run around them, but he's much better against squishies. This is going to take him a long time. So, like, in team fights, like we were just talking about a second ago with Lucian, he's just not going to put up that much damage in a lot of team fights, right? Because he's just going to have to try to chew through that tank, which is going to take a long time. So, like, while, you know, Jinx is just rocketing and murdering everybody in fights, and Sivir's throwing all that AoE, and Twitch is ulting, Xayah's dropping all those feathers, he's just sitting there, like, very slowly single target hitting the tank. So Jhin is very good in a very high damage meta with squishy champions. So if the enemy team just has a bunch of squishes, you know, they have a bunch of, you know, assassins or fighters or something like that, Rivens, your Jaxes, that type of stuff, he can do pretty well into that. But you see a Sejuani over there, you're going to have a big problem. So he's okay, but he's kind of a riskier pick than he used to be. Vayne is another one. After the nerfs, it's kind of rough. She does get bullied out and pushed in really hard early on by things like Sivir, Caitlyn, pretty much everything she loses lane to. She has no poke damage. She requires multiple items to come online. Like, she's okay with just Blade the Ruined King, particularly against someone like Ezreal, I guess, depending on the situation. But it's just, you're going to lose lane, and I just feel like there's just not enough compensation for that. At least with Twitch, like we talked about before, you know, he can go invisible. He can find some plays later. And similar problem also with Vayne to, like, Jhin and Lucian and some of these skirmisher champs is they just aren't as good in 5v5 as a lot of the top-end picks. They just don't have enough AoE damage to make up and to keep up with someone like Sivir or Jinx. So, anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did. Check out the rest of the content on the channel as well. I stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do have an in-depth patch notes, and we do have an in-depth support tier list as well, so check those out. I'll probably try to do one more tier list over the next couple of days. We'll see how it goes. But, yeah, see you next time. Have a great day.